no one saw this coming. A trade with so few people involved in it that will have lasting impact in the league.
Well, part of the reason it might have been kept so quiet is because Nico Harrison, the GM of the Mavericks, did not talk to any other team. Admittedly, only talked to the Lakers. Now, I'm not Red Auerbach, but if I've got Luka Dončić, or as I like to call him, 𝘱𝘕𝘪𝘦𝘭𝘪𝘯𝘕, you know why I call him Luka Ončić?
Why?
No D. Welcome to Wait What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGhee.
And I'm David Parro.
David, welcome to the pre-Super Bowl show of Wait What? We are the earliest pregame show of Super Bowl weekend. What's on your mind?
I fully expected coming into this show that we would be talking something NFL, something Super Bowl related, whether it be the advertisement, halftime show, whatever, sponsorship activations. I don't recall, Tim, a week where going into the Super Bowl where another league, another sport in the U.S. eclipsed in attention, or at least took a little bit of the oxygen. And that happened this week with this blockbuster trade between the Mavs and the Lakers, primarily focused on Luka Dončić. Most people consider him a top 5 player in the league, and Anthony Davis, but also touching a little bit of the Utah Jazz, because Danny Ainge had to get his hands in this thing a little bit. But I seriously have never seen a trade that was as tight-lipped as this. We woke up on Sunday morning to this news, and it was all over. And I've never seen something be so surprising since the end of M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. That was how shocking it seemed to me.
Wait! Don't ruin it for me. It's in,
okay.
It's in my queue on the DVR.
So, I mean, no one saw this coming. And so, I mean, how a trade with so few people involved in it that will have lasting impact in the league.
Well, part of the reason it might have been kept so quiet is because Nico Harrison, the GM of the Mavericks, did not talk to any other team. Admittedly, only talked to the Lakers. Now, I'm not Red Auerbach. But if I've got Luka Dončić, or as I like to call him, 𝘱𝘕𝘪𝘭𝘪𝘯𝘕, you know why I call him Luka Ončić?
Why?
No D.
Yeah. Right.
He's not known as a defensive player.
No.
But if I'm the GM and I've got this deal on the table, AD for Luka Dončić, the first thing I tell 𝘱𝘕𝘪𝘭𝘪𝘯𝘕, who I think is the GM of the Lakers, can you hold on for 1 second, please? And then I don't know if I call Philly about Joel Embiid. I don't know if I call but I'm making calls. And I'm saying, listen, I got this deal on the table where I'm going to get AD for Luka Dončić. Do you want to do something better?
Right.
And I guarantee you he would get something better. And I am not diminishing AD, who's a great player. First team All-Pro. First time in the history of the league. One first-team All-Pro player being traded for another first-team All-Pro player during the middle of the season. I'm not diminishing Anthony Davis as a player. What I'm saying is you have one of the top 5 players in the league, to your point. Why are you not trying to maximize what you get back?
Listen, it's one of the strangest things that we've ever heard. And to make this connection between Nico Harrison and Rob Pelinka a little odder, Rob Pelinka, famously known as being tied to Kobe, and Nico being a rep for Nike and managing that relationship with Kobe. It's a bizarre trade on so many levels. I do find it interesting because Anthony Davis, great all-around player, of course, but known as one of the best, front court defenders in the NBA. And to your point about Luka not playing any D, which he doesn't. I mean, I don't know what could have soured and how it could have, Jason Kidd not knowing, obviously Luka not knowing, LeBron not knowing. People accuse LeBron all the time of basically calling the shots with the Lakers. You look dubious. Are you thinking he knew?
I am very skeptical. Right? We say that we take a cynical look. I'm very skeptical, not necessarily cynical, but skeptical that he didn't know. But I know I know that from what I have heard, he has spoken positively about Luka Dončić and Luka Dončic's play. If there's anybody who can get the most out of a teammate, right, it would be somebody like LeBron. You're not going to let LeBron down if you're one of LeBron's teammates.
Well, one of the things that I noticed, particularly in the interview after he learned, by the way, LeBron, if you haven't noticed, is playing some pretty good ball right now. The Lakers are good.
They're what, 29 and 7.
LeBron looks like he's in it. He looks like he's in his 20s right now.
He's 40 years old. He said, I could play at a high level for another 7 or 8 years. And you tend to believe him. He then went on to say, I won't, but I could.
Right. But his performance at the Garden the other night was unbelievable. So does he get energized thinking that I have a player with Luka's offensive skills coming? I mean, it seems to me that would make him want to stick around, because he's not getting that out of Bronny. No offense to Bronny, but he's not getting that type of performance. But you have other players there. Austin Reeves, who's playing great. And Luka, listen, we're not GMs, and we don't profess to be that on this show. But Luka's got to get in shape. He's coming off of this injury. He's definitely going to have to get in shape.
Yes, for sure. In fact, I was watching Boomer and Gio this morning. For those of you who don't know, Boomer Esiason and Greg Giannotti, they have a talk show here in New York that's simulcast on CBS Sports Network. And Boomer Esiason basically came out and said that Luka Dončić is drinking way too much. I have no idea if that's true or not. That was Boomer Esiason, not me. Call WFAN if you've got a complaint. But he is not in great shape. Now he has been injured, off and on for the last year or so. But and that may play something into him being in shape. But if you've ever seen, seeing LeBron James in person, to me, doesn't do justice to what an incredible physical specimen he is. I have no idea what his workout regimen is. Well, my sense is he's probably going to give Luka Dončić his trainer's name and number.
Okay, so who wins out of this thing? I mean, I think most people are suggesting that the Lakers, on paper, from a team standpoint, are the big winners. Listen, I think Dallas has become it's obviously a great sports market, and Mavs and Stars have been as much a part of that, and the Rangers as well as the Cowboys have traditionally been. Obviously, football dominated in that state. But, since the ownership switch over there, who knows what the heck is really going on. Mark Cuban seemed to have been surprised by this. But I'll say this, having Dončić in LA, potentially with LeBron in his last few years, I think that's really good for the league. I think it's really good for Adam Silver, especially coming into the new TV deal.
Well, you ask who's the big winner. I'd say right now it's Kyrie Irving. The Mavs are 8th in the Western Conference at 26 and 24. The Lakers, as you're saying, are having a good year. They're 28 and 19. So they're really only, 2 and 5, 3.5 games behind the Lakers. So it remains to be seen if the Mavs can really come alive over the second half of the season. We're coming up on the unofficial, halfway point of the season with the All-Star break in next weekend. So we'll see. I do believe that if Dončić regains, and it's so weird to talk about him regaining his stature because he's still a great player. It's a great transition to that next generation. He's only 25 years old. So it's a great transition to that next generation of Laker icons, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Listen, Kyrie, it's going to be interesting because he's now back to being the guy there with this great additional player. Interestingly, Ainge tried to get these two together back in Boston. Never happened. Again, just interesting that Danny Ainge had his hands in this thing. I think it's kind of a sideshow piece of it. So it's just fascinating. And again, the reason I led with this, Tim, is just because I've never seen, we've seen blockbuster trades before, but nothing that seemed as surprising as this. All the talk, obviously, in the NBA on the trade side has been Jimmy Butler, or a big piece of it, and that hasn't gotten done. So yeah, this was shocker. I was anyone that I knew that was a Lakers fan, I was writing to on Sunday.
And what went virtually unnoticed, relatively speaking, De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs, putting a good young core with Wemby at the center, literally and figuratively. So, and that was, like I said, virtually ignored relative to the AD Dončić trade. So it's going to be an interesting second half of basketball in the NBA, that's for sure. Especially out west, right? It puts a lot more excitement in the Western Conference that might have otherwise been.
Yeah. And other than this beautiful on-air sign, it's actually lit up today. What else?
Which I'll move my head, so you'll have to get that on the video at some point.
Oh, it's on the video. It's looking good.
We're big time. We're global, right? We need to show that.
I lost count of how many countries we're in.
What's on my mind? I'm not saying that this has made one of my predictions come through a week after I made them, but I do believe it's worth mentioning. Those of you who listened last week, one of my prediction was that there would be a big scandal in professional sports leagues in North America around gambling. This does not raise to the level, I think, of a big scandal, but we did have two noteworthy news items over the past week. Terry Rozier, who's now playing for the Miami Heat, last year when he was playing for the Charlotte Hornets, was involved in a situation much like Jontay Porter, in which his play was questioned based on betting activity. He apparently got hurt, left the game early, did not play for the rest of the season. There was some unusual parlay bets placed around that game, so he is under investigation. And then a Major League Baseball umpire by the name of Pat Hoberg has been fired from his job, not for betting on baseball, which obviously I think would rise to the level of a scandal, but simply sharing an account with a betting account with a professional poker player and then not being forthcoming about his involvement with that betting account and that professional poker player. So just wanted to bring that up because I think and those people who listen know that I feel very strongly about betting and the dangers it poses to the integrity of professional sports. On a somewhat brighter note, I did read a piece today that because of advances in monitoring technology, including using AI and big data, match fixing has been on the decline because it's much harder for people to get away with that because it's easy to spot using big data and artificial intelligence through those monitoring systems. So, but again, I'm not a fan of betting, probably because I'm the cheapest guy on the planet. I can squeeze a nickel until the Native American kisses the buffalo, as they say. But we'll keep an eye on it.
I actually had this written down as a scandal or no scandal, and figuring that we might touch on this, particularly the Hoberg story. You're right. I think we're going to have to keep an eye on it and see if it rises. But your premise of your prediction, I think, was absolutely on target, and we'll have to decide how big these type of things get, and are there any other tentacles to them? Because I agree. I don't think we're going to see the end of it. But as these things get reported early, perhaps they do dissuade others from kind of getting, because these are absolutely going to get in the news. I do like the idea of scandal or no scandal as a future segment. We'll have to chat about that. And
Oh,
one of our
interesting.
speaking of predictions, I recognized as I was editing last week's show that I forgot one of my predictions. I didn't get to my what would have been the fourth prediction, but it was
Which
kind of
is?
lame. But which is only that because one of the predictions that you got right was that by the end of 2024, that the state of golf would still be in upheaval or disarray. My other prediction was going to be that whatever it is, the golf powers that be will come together in some organized fashion this year. Now, I don't think that's that crazy of a prediction, of course, but one of the first steps in that, in my view, has been the moving aside of Greg Norman and the installation of Scott O'Neill to head Live Golf, which I think bodes well. Scott is known as a uniter, someone that people can rally around.
Deal maker.
A deal maker. He's a positive guy. You can say many things about Scott in terms of his management style, how well he's liked, but he tends to foster positive feelings of those people he's around. His relationship, I'm sure, with the PGA Tour will be better than it was with Greg Norman, or excuse me, between Greg Norman and certainly Jay Monahan. And then the question is what deal ends up getting struck, who the investors are in it, public investment fund, obviously the other interests that have come, the strategic sports group that has come forth before, and just get something together that makes golf look not so ridiculous as I think it is right now. And it's just because there's these different factions that are vying for attention where there's not the market to give them. So even if there are separate entities like Live as a piece of the puzzle and the Tour as a piece of the puzzle, things will this year come together in some form or fashion where there are not at least warring factions as we've seen over the last 2 years. So that was the other thing
Okay, I'm glad you got it on record. We've got a great guest coming up. Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, very excited.
Okay, before we do, I just wanted to give one quick shout out. Something that I read shortly after we wrapped last week's show, but out in Los Angeles, which thankfully now all of those wildfires are officially considered contained, but the devastation was absolutely enormous. And the Dodgers, their owner, Mark Walters and Magic Johnson, along with Casey Wasserman, have pledged $100 million to the recovery efforts in the areas affected by those fires. And I just think that's such a phenomenal thing that needs to be brought up and given kudos to those guys, because we hear so much about billionaire owners and their greed and their arrogance and things like that. And so when you read about guys doing things like that, I just think it's worthy of recognition. So kudos to the Dodgers organization, their owners, and Casey Wasserman of Wasserman fame.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, we'll take a break and we will be right back.
It's time for our guest.
We're back, and we're really excited to have our next guest. Ben Reiling is the director at Nielsen Sports, but he has a long and storied career in the sports industry. Most notably, he spent nearly 20 years at the Coca-Cola Company, where he was the director of motorsports marketing. And for those of you who know anything about motorsports, you know that Coca-Cola is one of the biggest and most effective marketers in motorsports. And a lot of that can be traced back to Ben's time with the company. So Ben, welcome to the show.
Tim, thank you very much. Very kind words from you. And I'll be the first to say I stood on the top of the shoulders of giants there at Coca-Cola. So but I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
Oh, you're very
too,
welcome.
Dave. Yeah.
Great seeing you, Ben.
Okay. So Ben, we're just, as we record this, we're 5 days away from the biggest day in TV in the United States, the Super Bowl. So let's start by having you talk a little bit about why Nielsen is such a critical part of Super Bowl Sunday. Last week, David and I made our predictions based on a record 123.7, or was it 123.4 million people having watched the Super Bowl. We know that you've made a recent change to how you measure, or the amount of out-of-home viewers you're going to be able to measure. So take us through why Nielsen is such a critical piece of Super Bowl Sunday.
Well, I would tell you, Nielsen is an important part of Super Bowl Sunday for certainly all the advertisers, the people involved in the sports industry, certainly the NFL, the networks that carry it, because of our ability to truly kind of capture the mass number of people who assemble, who come to view and watch, certainly one of the best spectacles in all of sports. We do that through a lot of hard work through the years of not only working internally to make sure how we are accurately capturing the audience, but then more importantly, who is making up that audience. But that's also a lot of hard work working with the broadcasters as well, with the evolution of the broadcast industry and how people are consuming television content overall, but more importantly, just content. And so when it comes to the Super Bowl, so a lot of the work that we've been doing here, that Nielsen has been doing, not myself, but much smarter people, especially on the audience measurement side of the business, has evolved. You referenced one of them. I actually think the bigger thing that's really happening, this is for the Super Bowl, and it's also for all sports here in the U.S. going forward, is that we have now not only been accredited for this, which is significant. I can explain why that's important, but the fact that we're now taking our traditional panel and combining that with big data. Our panel of households, a little over 40,000 traditionally through the years that we've used that measurement to understand what's the viewership of the Super Bowl, but now the incorporation of big data. So that's getting us an additional 45 million homes, approximately 75 million devices. It's truly going to give us a really a much deeper way with our viewership numbers being adding greater stability to that measurement as well. So it's really getting into the masses, but also because we have the ability with our panel, we're still able to provide the people who are interested is like, who tuned in? What do they look like? Where are they from? As opposed to where big panel can't get that level of detail, or I'm sorry, big data can't get that level of detail, our panel household can still do that. I mentioned that it's accredited. So this is now, is the currency. And it's not because we said so, it is because we have worked with the industry of individuals, organizations, agencies, networks on down the line, these representatives. And so that's a really big advancement for us. You referenced the out of home. We have gone now to 100% of out of home for the Super Bowl, but also, again, for all sports, all broadcasts that we're able to measure. And so that out of home coverage, 44 of the biggest U.S. markets previously, which is roughly 2/3 of the U.S. population, we're now at 100%. And so that level and quality of data information we're going to be able to provide to the NFL, to the networks on down the line and other sports is much more, again, adds a bit more of that stability, but also really truly captures in some of those markets where it might have been harder for us to reach in the past.
Before I hand it off to David, I do have a question. Does Nielsen do Super Bowl pools differently than almost all the other companies in America? Do you bet on who or how many viewers there's going to be?
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about betting, but what I can tell you is that I have not seen it. Let's put it that way. We are still very traditional, I think, when it comes to who's going to win, what's the score going to be, and maybe some other side bets that we might put in.
Well, before you leave, we're going to ask for your prediction because David and I are going to make ours at the end of the show.
Excellent. I like that.
Yeah, but I'm curious if you could it's like Tim can't make a prediction on the Naismith Award, right? I'm wondering, could you make a prediction? Because we made our predictions on how many people we're going to watch. Can you do that, or is that?
That would be off limits.
Following up on what you just were talking about, over the years, Nielsen sometimes is treated like a punching bag, or had been, from the industry, like, all right, the numbers aren't right, they're not counting this or they're not counting that. You guys seem like you've added, the whole 100% of out of home now. That's remarkable, right? You're getting that bar audience, you're getting the way other people are now consuming. Are there any new things that you're adding, say, this year, or how do you keep on top of how we're going to make sure we're delivering on that promise of reporting on all the eyeballs that are actually on the game?
David, I would tell you that the advancement we've made, of the ones that I just referenced, in terms of including the big data into it, as well as then increasing the out of home, more of what the advancements that I can speak to probably is more in terms of how are we collecting that. And so the ability now of having individuals with wearable devices, we're making a much more advanced, because that allows us to truly capture when we have a member of our panel household going out and being away from home. We still have that ability of where they are, which is then truly going to capture if they're at a bar or restaurant watching the Super Bowl or watching a NASCAR race or watching the Final Four. It's really more of the behind the scenes of how we're collecting that. And quite frankly, if we were a punching bag, that's part of what you accept as a business. You're always wanting to try to be able to advance and move forward. And so you have to be able to take some criticism, understand where is that coming from, how do we then work together to achieve and overcome that and deliver and be better at what we're doing. And I think that my brethren and sisters who are on the traditional Nielsen audience measurement side of the business, as I said on the Nielsen sports side, a lot of props and credit goes to them for having worked through a lot of that and to make a better environment that the industry is recognizing and that the industry is going to be putting into the marketplace and using as currency. And the fact that they've done so in a way that Nielsen is the only accredited provider of that, there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. There's a lot of investment that goes into that. So there's a lot of elements that have gone into play. Those two are really the notable. It's really more the behind the scenes of how we achieve that is important.
Tim, how much of a pro is Ben? He didn't even come close to taking any bait on calling the networks or the properties whiners at all. Didn't even come close to doing that.
No, and he probably doesn't appreciate you doing it.
Probably not.
Look,
well, I've always been on the side of him, though. That's my point. That's me saying that.
Yeah, guys, what I would tell you, and this you're actually almost jumping ahead to later on when I know you're going to ask some questions, perhaps about my background, my career, things that I've learned, and really what I think what I've tried to achieve personally is I think what I see in the values of what Nielsen has achieved, and that is, taking it on, just facing it, understanding and accepting, hey, things aren't perfect, and so how do we make things a bit better than it was yesterday? And if you can do that and you can achieve that as a business, that's monumental. If you can achieve it as a human being, that's hopefully what makes the world a bit of a better place tomorrow.
We were fortunate to have Mark Lazarus when he was running all of NBC Universal on the show, and his comment has stuck with me in the 2 years since he's been on, which is everybody wants to grade their own homeworks. And this is not a knock on NBC per se. They don't like the grades that they get sometimes. So they, rather than look inwardly and say, what could we do better to draw a bigger audience, they blame the teacher for the way they graded their homework.
It's very true. I've seen that happen far too many times in my career, as I'm sure the two of you have seen it as well.
Yeah. So you work on the what's called the rights holder side, correct? You work with sports properties, but what are some of the solutions that you guys offer for property/rights holders and for brands? Because I know there's a lot of solutions that you give to brands who are sponsors and advertisers. Could you take us through some of the interesting things that some leagues or properties may not know about, and certainly some brands might not know about?
I appreciate the question. I appreciate the opportunity. The two of you are probably aware of this, as I'm sure many of your listeners are aware. I mean, Nielsen and Nielsen Sports specifically is a global business. We have offices around the globe, around the world. We're doing this work day in and day out, whether it be on behalf of leagues and teams brands, as you mentioned. We work with some of the biggest agencies around the world. And then within my realm of working with rights holders, we kind of divvy that up within our group, within Nielsen Sports here domestically, but also internationally. And, it's the primary role of Nielsen Sports to work with them. And in my primary role of in rights holders and how we define rights holders here in the U.S., once you get that past the professional leagues, the Major League Baseballs, the NHLs, the MLSs, NBAs, NFLs on down the line, a lot of the major sports leagues then fall into our rights holders group. So when I'm referencing and I'm talking about the work that we're doing out of rights holders around motorsports, yes, around golf, bowl games, the NCAA, working with even with working some of them with networks, assisting them to understand what value are they bringing to the table and providing to a lot of their partners. So aside from, as I mentioned, leagues, teams, brands, agencies, and rights holders, a lot of the work that we do is pretty consistent across them. It's just a matter of what vertical do they fall in, as well as then what's the objectives and goals that particular client is attempting to achieve. In the case of rights holders, that's going to be a little bit different and unique than it might be on behalf of a brand. But the business across all of that, primarily centered on media evaluation, absolutely. So our typical work that most of the clients have tapped into Nielsen Sports through the years has fallen in this bucket. And that's really looking at the exposure analysis in terms of logo presence, brand integration into broadcast. That's extended into streaming, yes. Has it extended into social media? Yes. Has it extended into digital media and OTT? Absolutely, it has. And we do that both domestically and internationally. Our offices and our ability to do the audience measurement work, which is the core of Nielsen work, feeds into helping us from the Nielsen Sports side to help our clients understand value proposition that is driven by way of that audience that is tuning in and or listening and on radio and or following on social networks. But we have that ability to do that both domestically and internationally for a lot of these leagues. Once you get beyond the media evaluation, a lot of work kind of falls into the bucket of research and consulting. So we are continuously in market with gathering proprietary syndicated research for a number of clients. We have our Nielsen Fan Insights, which is a global fan insights portal out in the marketplace here in the US on a monthly basis. Many markets around the world, monthly to quarterly, and some of them can be semi-annual just based on the size, the market size of the need that is out there. So that's over 50 plus countries where we're gathering insights among consumers, especially around the world of sports, but also gets into categories and brands, gets into their thoughts and behaviors as it might relate to those categories, as well as to their behaviors, attitudinal behaviors towards sponsorship and what does sponsorship mean. So we do that work there. I mentioned proprietary research. A lot of the work we're talking about and many more of our clients are listening to and really wanting to understand better to go beyond exposure analysis is, what does that really do? What's that really doing for me as a brand, as a rights holder, as a league? And that's where we get into sponsorship impact type work. So it gets into more of the attitudinal. It's one thing for the logo to be seen, but is the logo being seen and the communication campaigns that are associated with that, is it driving the brand funnel? Overall, is it driving the awareness all the way down through consideration and or purchase? Similarly, then from a sponsorship impact, there's also brand impact. So it's kind of looking at it from the brand lens versus that of looking through a rights holder lens or a league lens, it might be. And there's a whole host of other things that we're doing on behalf of clients within Nielsen Sports, and that is, assisting them with their asset commercialization. So some might call it a rate card. It's understanding the assets that you have presently, as well as assets you might be considering in terms of how do we use our Nielsen data and analytics to help inform what does that commercialization opportunity look like. That can be in the form of just general assets across the board, specific for, we work on naming rights proposals, media rights assistance there with a lot of our clients, sponsorship targeting. So now it's not only using the data information we have from our viewership information, who's tuning in, who's watching, but also linking that into our Nielsen Fan Insights or even our Nielsen Scarborough data that we have to kind of find where's those opportunities lie for you with consumers, as well as then where's information lie using like Nielsen ad intel to understand who's buying, who's most active in these spaces. And so therefore, how does that help a potential rights holder, league, or team understand locally or nationally what's the best opportunity for us to grow and increase our revenue, but do so in a way that's a positive impact to the fans that are tuning in or attending our matches and games. That also extends into economic impact reports. And I'm really keen on the fact that it's not, economic impact reports are wonderful, they're great, but the ability now we're looking at how does that also the attitudinal impact. So for instance, a market might be hosting a big national event. It's great for the hotel industry, for the travel industry, for restaurants, for transportation, for the ticket sales, on down the line. But also attitudinally, is that sponsorship actually assisting the local market and or that general area in a better feeling towards that city and the efforts that they're taking to bring in events like that? And also, what are they doing even from an environmental impact? And our ability to measure all that and really kind of tie it in. It's every time I think what we're trying to do at the end of the day and all this work at Nielsen Sports is what's that next level? Here's the valuation measurement. Okay, what does that mean attitudinally? What does that mean potentially for the impact that you're making on a greater community with an event that might be hosted in a certain market area? It's always the curiosity that drives us. And quite frankly, it's the curiosity of our clients who is in lockstep with us to get to that level of understanding what can we be doing a bit better.
You obviously are sitting on a ton of data. You mentioned your insights product. I'm curious as to what trends do you have your eye on, things that we might be seeing in the very near future that are coming out of this trove of information?
Yeah, excellent question, David. I think like anything else, it's one thing to have data. It's now the understanding of what does it mean, and what are the actionable opportunities that come along with it. And I think there's a couple of things that I would think about in terms of what's the data showing us over the past year or a couple of years, and that is, and a lot of this is probably not going to be earth-shattering to most people, but certainly what's happening with the streaming viewing minutes growth. And presently, it is about on par with cable and broadcast. They're about on par. Cable broadcast combined is about what streaming is delivering. So this continual evolution, we're seeing what's going on with the streaming landscape. We measure this by, I encourage your listeners to go out and take a look at Nielsen the gauge. It's published on a basis where we're showing here's what's going on and here's what the changes that are happening. What we're seeing from that, what's the impact of that is the impact of live sports on that measurement. You can see the ticks when live sports are coming back into play and you get the return of seasons. You're going to see the fact that broadcast and or cable is going to start to rise up again. But what we saw with the recent election cycle was a shift in how that metric plays out in terms of the difference between streaming, cable, and broadcast. And then most notably, the specific examples of what's driving that is you're starting to see the players like Netflix and Peacock and Apple all getting in the nature of executing live sports, and that's impacting that as well. So this evolution that's going on with streaming. I think the other key trend point we're seeing, to no one's surprise, is women's sports. The growth in the revenues of women's sports, primarily here in North America. We're seeing it more so in North America and Europe at this point in time, also being driven by soccer and basketball. Those are the key drivers in there. So that trend and the recognition of how women in sports has really evolved with a lot of great effort behind organizations, behind individuals, behind the recognition, the impact of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese from the college basketball, really elevating that to another level. And now that's continued on into the WNBA. That's where we're seeing some impact and some trend line data there. The other one is also interesting too. This one's a little bit newer, and I don't have as much depth of the information, but we're really tracking the growth and evolution of influencer marketing and how that is becoming a really valuable tool for brands, yes, but also rights holders and leagues and teams, and how that is going to continue to grow, and our ability to monitor to help them assess the best opportunities within influencer marketing. Who you're trying to reach, what's the audience, and then more importantly, who are those individuals that is going to help you reach that audience, and then always you close the loop out by being able to steward the results, analyze, and provide them guidance in terms of here's what's working, here's what's not working, as hard as it could be. That helps them inform an evolution of the campaign or the approach overall. I think those are the three. There's probably many more, but in the interest of time, I think those are the top three that I'd be thinking about.
Hey, before I ask the next question, I have to, of course, give credit to David for what you termed an excellent question.
Ben, this is the first time I've ever actually led in this category, because this is up for 2025, because I'm now up 1-0. He normally blows me away.
You are the first guest of 2025.
All right, so do you guys place bets on that?
But neither of us are actually bettors.
It's funny, Ben, because before you came on, I was talking about how much I hate betting. And here I am going, yeah, let's bet on it. Yeah. I'm like Fred Flintstone. If you remember Fred Flintstone, bet. Fred Flintstone was the first TV character to have a gambling addiction. I don't know if most of our listeners realize that. And once again, we go back more than 50 years for a cultural reference.
Yeah, I was proud of my 6 Cents cultural reference, because that was only 1999.
I don't want you to name names, of course, but when you're dealing with rights holders and their sponsors, and what are some things that rights holders and brands are getting right, and what are some things they're getting wrong? Meaning, what could they be doing more or better or differently when it comes to using data to drive their business decisions?
I personally wouldn't use the word wrong, and I appreciate the fact that I wouldn't name anybody anyway, but I think wrong is because I believe that using data is critically important. It's not wrong. So if you're using it, that's a good start. How could you be using it differently? How could you be using it better, perhaps? That's a question I think is well worth it. The first thing that comes to my mind is priorities, right? Every organization I've worked at, even though I was at the Coca-Cola Company, everybody thought we had a printing press in the basement. We didn't. We always had to operate within limited resources. And when I look at limited resources, and when I say resources, I think about people, time, and money. It's not just money. It is, how do you prioritize the data that you need? What do you need? What's going to make a difference for you, as opposed to just buying data to have data to say that you have data? And so I really think about the first thing is the priorities of what do you need, and understand why are you wanting to get this data? What's your intended outcome of getting this data? I think if they can really focus on that, I think they can always be doing the best work possible, as well as a data provider. I mean, believe me, I would love that every client bought absolutely every piece of data that we could sell them. But at the end of the day, if that's not going to deliver the results they need, then I think we all can understand that's probably going to be a short-term relationship. We're not in for that. Insights from data, I think, is the other key thing as well. Companies, I think, they're getting better at it, is the ability to combine data. So if you're getting multiple data points from single source, multiple sources, is working with a provider that goes beyond just the data delivery. It's not just the portal and the dashboard or the numbers that is delivered in an Excel report. It's challenging us, and we should challenge them to understand what's behind this data. What are the insights? What are the actions that can be taken? What are the actions that might need to be stopped? And help them avoid probably getting lost in that data, right? I think that's another critical thing. And I think the third thing I'd probably reference is something I've seen more based on my role. I've seen this occur more so in the world of motorsports, is using the data to understand how can they drive a good balance between needing to deliver a brand value with understanding of how that brand's message and what's the brand want to be as part of this relationship as well. So they've become a bit more creative in how they're executing some of their the assets, I should say. So traditionally, just slapping a logo on a car. Now you're seeing campaigns come to life on whether it's a car, a uniform, some piece of signage, and it's a challenge at the same time because our system is going to be tracking and monitoring that. Sometimes that creative that I would say looks wonderful on a PowerPoint, and believe I'm talking from experience here at the Coca-Cola Company. You look at a PowerPoint, you look at a logo, you look at a campaign message, boy, it looks great. You put it up on the big screen in front of the room, everybody says, oh, that looks wonderful. You put it on something that either the element, the car in this case, or the athlete is moving, or the production camera is moving, it gets lost a little bit. So it's the fine point of where they found some good creative execution that balances the need to be working with the brand, delivering the brand message, but also balancing that in a way where it's going to deliver value and the viewer is going to recognize and understand, yeah, I got that. That was from XYZ brand execution. It wasn't just the logo, but I have the correlated relationship to understand that was related back to that brand. I don't know if that made sense or not, but
wonderful stuff. Listen, before we move on to what we call our closing questions, I would be remiss if we didn't have you harken back a bit, Ben. As Tim mentioned in his intro, almost 20 years at one of the most iconic global brands. Can you top line a lesson or two that you gleaned from your time at that company? Whether it was in the motorsport space or working across other properties during your tenure there.
I'll link it into three areas. The first is leadership. The second is mutual respect and understanding. And then the third is going to be in partnerships. And I'll talk about leadership, and I'll use a quote from a gentleman that was a mentor of mine within the organization, the Coca-Cola Company. And he loved to say, and it's applicable today as well. So it's going to be in the vernacular of what my role there. But the quote was along the lines of, "There's no such thing as a bad bottler or a bad customer. They are a reflection of the Coca-Cola Company." And so I heard that and it's one of those things like here, like, okay, I think I get it. But then when you really start to get in, you do this day to day, it applies in so many ways. And like I said, the work that I do today, it applies, externally with clients. And I think it also applies internally with your coworkers. And that is, leadership, and we're all leaders. Like, it doesn't matter about a title, right? We're all leaders. At some point in time, you're in a position or role where folks around you might look to you, whether you have a title or not. And so therefore, they may only be a reflection of what you're bringing to the table and how you lead them and how you present yourself, how you set an example. And I think that is something that I walked away from a leadership perspective. The other one, a reference to mutual respect and understanding. Also another quote that I'm going to use the vernacular from the Coca-Cola days, and that is, if the bottler did everything that we asked out of Coca-Cola North America, out of Atlanta, if the bottler did everything that we asked, they'd go broke. And if we did everything that they asked us, we would still be in a 6.5 ounce bottle. There's a mutual respect and understanding each other's business. What are they trying to achieve? Knowing that they have operational considerations, they have cost and revenue considerations. The whole idea of how do you build a relationship in a way that, all right, I want to achieve this, but I can't do it at the detriment of you losing out. We've got to find a way where we're going to grow a little bit together. So we may not get everything that we want with a client today because they have their limitations, and vice versa. We may not be able to get them everything they want because we have our operational considerations as well. But over time, if you have that built-in respect and trust with one another, you're going to achieve it. You just got to make sure you take it over time. And the last one kind of links into that is partnerships. Solid long-term partnerships. And I saw this many times behind the scenes. Nothing ever became public. If you have a good, solid relationship and a partnership with a brand or with a rights holder, there's going to be some give and take along the way. There's going to be times that we are struggling and we need your help. And there's times that you're struggling and you're going to need our help. And if we have the best interest over the long-term period of time of working together to achieve success, we're going to find a way that some years we might be down a little bit because we have to help them out. But when they're strong and we might need some help from them, they're going to be there to have our backs as well. And I think those are a couple of key things that I learned that I continue to try to apply on a daily basis today.
Great stuff.
So 2 quick hits before we let you go, Ben. Questions, as David mentioned, we ask all our guests. The first one is,
Where'd your career get started? Where'd you started?
As a listener, I knew the question was coming, and I'd never really thought about how I'd answer it until I got the wonderful invitation from the two of you. I've got a 2-phase approach. The first phase, to get a start in the business, I was working at a company, Tim, you might be familiar with this company, Contemporary Marketing, out of St. Louis. And I was
David's familiar with them as well.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So it was by happenstance, and I didn't recognize it until years later when I was more formally involved in the world of sport and entertainment. But it was a program where General Foods International Coffees sponsored, I use the word term now sponsored. Back then I probably just said they're paying money to have the Rolling Stone, the photographs exhibits circle college campuses. I'm fresh out of college still. I'm going to 23 college campuses across the country, touring a Rolling Stone magazine covers photo exhibit. It was a book. The book is still available. I still have one here. But the whole idea was that, that was like an introduction into terms of how does a brand tap into reach an audience based on an interest and a passion that audience has. And so I take that into phase 2, where I really received the opportunity. And then at this time it was thanks to 𝘱𝘕 and Gary Azer at Coca-Cola. B is still there. Gary was always behind the scenes. I don't think there are certain people that knew who Gary was outside of the organization, but he preferred to be behind the scenes. They gave me an opportunity to step into sports marketing at Coca-Cola to take on a really, really well-kept secret at the time. Typically things get out at a company like Coca-Cola, like we know what's going on about 6 months, a year before it happens. And this one literally was a November 1st meeting of saying, hey, we're taking on, going to take over the role of Winston at the National Hot Rod Association. They eventually came to me to ask if I'd be willing to take that on as leading that relationship. And, from there, I never looked back. The quotes that I referenced earlier, the learnings that I referenced earlier, those were critical learnings from them. Wonderful leaders, wonderful mentors, challenged me at times as well. But that's, I look at it as a phase 1 and a phase 2 of how I got involved in the sports industry.
The last question is, what piece of advice would you have for a young professional looking to get into the sports business?
Tim, that's a great question. I'm noting that you're both even now. All right.
No, because we came up with that, so it's like 1.5 to. It's like a Ryder Cup. It's now 1.5 to a half.
Okay.
But thank you for that. For trying.
Getting started in the industry, I consistently like to talk to people. My recommendation, quite frankly, is if you want to get involved in the sports industry and you think sports and or entertainment, because they're interwoven, I like to talk about, I think the best experience you can get is going on the agency side of the business. If the agency has a list of clients that come from different industries, they're going to have different objectives, they're going to have different personnel, they're going to have different work styles, you're going to have all these things that you'll have vantage point to. You're going to learn a great deal from each one of them. Pay attention to them, really utilize that as a way to build a network, not only a network of understanding different sports and entertainment properties, building a network of different clients. So if you eventually want to go to the property side of the business, you have a better understanding of how that operates, how that looks and feels. Likewise, on the brand side of the business, you have that, you have a network and you have an understanding to some degree of how brands operate, because they operate differently, not only from brand to brand, but between those organizations. they can operate differently. And that's where I kind of look into that. I also like to talk and remind individuals in this, and I've helped a few. It's like, be prepared to work hard. You're gonna have long hours, you're gonna have odd hours. The pay isn't always necessarily the greatest, but if you understand the sacrifices that you may need to make and take on in the near term, that's going to help you define your long-term opportunities as well. So it's go in with eyes wide open. And the last thing I'd say, this actually is something I probably should have mentioned within my learnings at the Coca-Cola Company, that it's advice that is good for all of us, but especially for as you're coming into this, is a couple of things. No surprises. Your manager should never be surprised. Your client should never be surprised. Work in strategy and only do what is right for the business. If you can adhere to that, you're going to have an opportunity to grow within whatever organization you go to, whether it's an agency or if you start out with a rights holder or you start out with a brand. Just live by those things, because you're bringing a lot of talent to the table. Obviously, there's a lot of experience that's in front of you that you're going into, but if you're bringing in the skills and the things that you're learning, you're bringing something new and different into an organization automatically. Just kind of follow that. No surprises. Work in strategy and do what's right for the business.
Great advice. And I think that you might be the first person who specifically said start on the agency side, and your reasoning is incredibly insightful. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you as always.
I also just want to add that the data that we receive at MoneyGram from Nielsen that helps shape a lot of things that we do in looking at what how we place ourselves on cars, uniforms, and equipment and things like that is super valuable. So thanks to you and the team there.
I'm glad it's of use. Obviously, the two of you appreciate the opportunity, number one, but more so just the friendship and the connection through the years. I look forward to the next time. Hopefully, it'll be soon where we can reconnect again.
That would be great. Thank you, Ben.
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
It was wonderful, Tim, to have a guest back on, Ben Reiling, who you and I have known for a number of years. Great guy, doing cool things at Nielsen, and obviously he just has such a great history and track record in the sports biz. So thank you, Ben, again for jumping on the show. This is the.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and I have the Nice Guy Awards. I don't think there's anybody in our industry who would be upset if they made a Mount Rushmore of nice guys in the sports business, and Ben would be one of the people up there.
Yeah, a really tremendous guy. So this is the time of the show where we tend to look forward. We do have a big event coming up this weekend, and we're going to give you our thoughts. There's one thing I want to mention, though, to you. You gave a interesting point about the Chiefs' favorable call situation. You use the clock being on 11:11, and I think you might be really onto something, because I went and bought bagels this weekend. Things are quite expensive in New York City, and I bought two, with different varieties, and the amount was 11:11. I swear it was 11:11. I was shocked. I think I tried taking a picture of it, actually, as it came up on the screen. But anyway, I just wanted to say, I think you're onto something.
Well, I am not the first person to notice that phenomenon for sure, but thank you. But speaking of which, I don't know about you, David, but I get people who tell me they listen to the show, and I don't think they do. And I don't blame them, because as you know, I don't listen to the shows.
I gave you an assignment last week, and you're supposed to listen to the show, which obviously you haven't. But
not yet. No, but I will do it. I will do it. And that's fine. It's kind of them to say that, even if they don't really listen. But within a very short time of when you put up the show and I linked to it through LinkedIn, I got a text from a friend of mine, a guy named Dave Kopelman, who works at Playfly Sports. And he has told me that he listens to the podcast, and he actually referenced the show. So he listened to it very quickly after we posted. So thank you, Dave, for that. But here, I'm going to read what he said. I don't think he'll mind, but we were talking about the calls that the Chiefs supposedly get, and the refs have it in the bag, and conspiracy theories think that the refs want the Chiefs to three-peat and so forth. But here's Dave's text to me. I like your 11 o'clock comparison to Mahomes. I also think that the Chiefs are better coached than their opponents, both to draw those flags and to not commit them against the opponent. At the same time, I feel opponents need any edge they can get to try to beat Pat and occasionally get frustrated, causing fouls. That all said, more calls need to be reviewable. And I wrote back to him, that's a great take. I really do think that was a great take, and something that I at least didn't think of is
It's
Chiefs
really
are
good
really
take.
good at football.
They're really good. They're really good from top to bottom. I mean, it's not quite as relevant, I think, as bagels costing $11.11 at my local Black Seed bagel store. But very good take.
Was that for two bagels?
Yeah, it was.
Was that for two bagels?
It was for two bagels, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was one. The prices are ridiculous. Anyway, thank you for listening. What do you got your eye on, and are you ready to make a Super Bowl prediction?
I've got my eye on the Super Bowl, and I am ready to make my prediction. I think it's going to be a great game. I think I may be one of the few people outside of the greater Kansas City metro area that's rooting for the Chiefs, but that's okay. That's because of past guest and friend of the show, Mark Donovan, president of the Chiefs. No other reason. But I do like the way they play football, and I'm going to make a prediction. The Chiefs are going to win 31-28. They have not allowed, as far as I know, 30 points to an opponent the entire year, having beaten the Bills 31-29 or 32-29. So my prediction is 31-28 Chiefs.
Okay. I'm glad that's your prediction, because it makes it more fun that I'm going to pick the Eagles, and I'm picking them for reasons of fandom. I did grow up as an Eagles fan, even though my allegiance, as we know, well documented, as a Bears fan. So I'm pulling for the Eagles. I also think it's going to be a great game. I have it at 27-24.
So we both have it as a very tight matchup.
I'm also looking forward not only to the game, but to commercial. I haven't really watched. I did see a tease on the Duncan spot from this year, and that's always fun. And hopefully on the next episode, we'll talk about ads that we thought broke through, and maybe ones that we thought were clunkers.
I don't think there'll be any shortage of opinion from you and I on that. That's for sure.
Pretty sure of that. Listen, we've had a full show, obviously. Again, thanks to Ben Reiling from Nielsen Sports for joining us. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Dave, for your input that Tim received. And we appreciate all the feedback that we get. So please, if you like us, share us, comment, send us feedback, engage with us on the social channels as well. We really, really do appreciate. So until next time, I'm DP, he's McGee, and we'll talk soon.